So, Martin, take it away, good sir.
Changes are afoot in Derbyshire, England, where four families, all possessed of eligible young gentlemen and ladies, find themselves embroiled in romance and intrigue during a time of optimism. Fortune has recently smiled on these somewhat neglected estates, families with respectable histories that endured hard times in the late 18th century. Now in the mid-19th, the families Asquith, Cavendish, Ponsonby and York have coincidentally come into new sources of income and are intent on improving their country estates and restoring their failing reputations. The inflow of funds is modest, but there is a new optimism abroad in southern Derbyshire.
I really shouldn't have had him read that. Now it sounds so that the peasantry here having to follow that. All right, thank you.
Trust me, I'm very much the peasantry.
But the accent says otherwise, right? All right. So in Obsession, players' objective is to renovate a neglected country estate, rehabilitate the family's tarnished reputation, and improve the prospects of eligible children, with the ultimate goal being to restore the family's standing amongst the Derbyshire social elite, which is essentially measured in victory points. And those points being on a score pad at the end of the game. So what are you guys looking at? First off, you'll notice that there's a handful of boards that we're going to be playing on tonight. Tonight, the Obsession, or the main board here. We have Servants for Hire. We have Under Butlers, when these are available, which they are not available quite yet. So we're actually going to put them off to the side like so. There are Footmen, which are the white ones. We have Valets, which are green. And we have Ladies' Maids, which are purple. Then we have the objective cards. The objective cards are end-game goals or scoring cards. Then up above, we have casual guests, the casual guest display, as well as the casual guest deck, marked by the single fleur-de-lis. And then we have prestige guests, which are the double fleur-de-lis, as well as this deck, as well as down below here. Then we have the builder's market, which has the improvement tiles, as you can see down there, which we've already drawn for the start of the game. Then over on the Adderley Hall board, or the round track board, we have the round track around the outside. We are going to be playing the extended play for tonight's game. More on that here in a little bit. Then in the top left corner, we have the theme cards. In the top right corner, we have the victory point cards. And then we have Charles and Elizabeth Fairchild, which are a couple of folks that we may be trying, or we're going to be fighting over to gain the fancy of, if you will. Then off board, as you can see over on the left-hand side, we have the bank. We're going to be dropping the zeros so that whenever we gain 200 pounds or 200 quid, we're just going to gain 2 quid, just for simplicity's sake. Then we have the casual guest display, as I mentioned, off board, the prestige guest display off board here, and we have the draw bag that's filled with various improvement tiles. Then over on the player tableaus, we have a player board, as you can see, and really it's kind of two different boards. We have one board here and we have a second board here, but they're all kind of pushed together like so. So everybody has an asymmetric starting bonus for each family. I am the Asquith family, and my family bonus is shown here. Everyone has a different one. We will go over those before we begin play this evening. There is the reputation track over here, the current reputation level based on the reputation track orbit. So it has not made an orbit. It starts at 1 reputation and can go all the way up to a maximum, and these are double-sided as such. Then there is the turn order player aid, which shows the order of play in a given turn. There are special actions that can be taken on a player's turn as well. Then the activity space. The activity space here is where a chosen activity will go when it's the chosen action this round. Players may or may not need a reminder token as the game goes on. Then there is the servants track down below that. All servants start in the available service space here. We have a blue butler. We have a housekeeper in red. We have the aforementioned footman, valet, and lady's maid as well. So that is everyone's starting servants. Then there, as you expend service, they're going to take time to be able to get and be available again. Then down below that, there is the country estate improvements, as shown here. There are 5 types of improvements There are essentials, service, estate, prestige, and sporting. You'll notice also that the tiles themselves also say that. So as play advances, we're going to be gaining more and more of these tiles. We may actually just remove this just to save screen space as we go along, and players may also want to do so if they have a smaller table. So it'll save a little bit of space as well. These tiles are the player's choice of various activities in a given round. Then they also have a hand of cards, which these hand of cards are made up with their family member cards, as well as some others that they have drawn to start the game. And there are some objective cards here, and I'll go over more of those here in a little bit. I want to point out and remind everybody that we are playing the extended game as well as the expert variant, which considerably reduces the randomness of the game as suggested by the designer for our audience. So makes sense. So there we go. So how do you play the game? The game is divided into 4 seasons, with each season divided into rounds. There are standard rounds followed with a courtship event to close out the season. Before a season can begin with the first player, in our case it's rounds 1, 6, 11, and 16 in our extended game, a courtship theme card will be revealed. Players will attempt to win the seasonal courtship by scoring the most victory points on tiles of the same theme category. And in fact, we can go ahead and flip the first one for the start of the game to be able to show everybody. So the prestige tiles are the ones that are only going to count for the first season. Then each player in clockwise order will execute 1 standard turn per game round. After the last player has executed their turn, the pawn is advanced on the round track. Continue this until a white courtship space is reached. This is a special round in which no activities will take place. Instead, players simply evaluate the seasonal courtship. Then the first player marker is passed clockwise. We're using the challenge coin. And a new season begins. After the 4th season is complete, victory points are tallied. Whoever has the most points wins. So let's go over what happens in a standard turn. Here we go. So first off, you have 2 options. You have to pass or to take a standard turn. I'll go through passing at the very end of this. So let's go through a standard turn. Step 1, and you can see as such here, is rotate service. Then the second is host activity. The third is invite guests. The 4th is provide service. The 5th, enjoy favors. And finally, the 6th is to clear the board. So let's go ahead and start with rotate service. We're going to move servants 1 space to the right. So if I have used, say, my butler here at the beginning of my turn, he will advance to the servants' quarters. If he was already in the servants' quarters, he would then advance to the available service. Only servants in the available service space are available to be used in a given turn. So if I have something like this, only these 2 are available on a given turn. That is going to dictate what actions and what activities a player can take on their turn. Obviously, this is going to be skipped in the first round as all the servants are in the available service space for all players. So step 1, rotate service, easy enough. Step 2, host activity. Each improvement tile represents a room or outside space on a player's estate. On each tile, in white, is listing what activity hosted in that space. It's basically a flavor text for what it is that you're going to be doing. So on the bowling green, you're going to be playing bowls. In the front parlor, possibly playing whist. Afternoon tea in the main gazebo, so on and so forth. You're going to choose an activity to host by placing that tile on the activity space on the player board. So for instance, let's say I choose to plan the village fair. So I would actually place this up here in the activity space here. And the servant indicated must be available to be used. So we place the servant that it calls for. It calls for the butler. So the butler will then go on to the activity to show that he is being used for the host activity. Simple enough. First 2 steps, really easy. Scoot over, pull one up. All right, good. Step 3 is invite guests. The activity on the improvement tile indicates which guests may be invited to partake in the given activity. So it's listed just above the box that shows which servant is required. This shows that it requires the butler and 2 family members. So let's go over the anatomy of a gentry card first and foremost. So taking a look here at Charles, the Viscount Pemberley. Gentry cards are all of the large cards. Gentry are referred to as people of good social position just below nobility. So every card that is the larger card, not these smaller objective cards, all of the larger cards are considered gentry. All family and guest cards, so for instance, a guest card versus a family card, okay? The top left number is the minimum reputation value a player can have to invite the guest to an activity. Also shows either as a family member, here we have the family crest versus a number, so if it shows the family crest, we're going to treat that as a 1. A casual guest has a 1 on it. A prestige guest will have 2 fleur-de-lis and have a larger number that ranges from 3 to 6 on it as well. The top right number is endgame victory points, so 2 victory points here, none for this fine fellow, 2 for that one, etc. The bottom left indicates any servants that may be required, so you'll notice that neither of these two require any kind of servants, whereas this gentleman requires a valet to attend him in addition. And then the bottom right is the reward that the guest provides when they take part in the activity. So £100 British, or possibly 1 reputation, 3 reputation, etc., etc. And we'll go over more of these as come along. The text in the middle usually is flavor text, but if there is something in the bottom right-hand corner that has an asterisk, such as Lady Eleanor Chesterton, she has a little asterisk on this. So the asterisk then says there may be some kind of prerequisite to be able to gain that reward, okay? Any questions on the anatomy of a gentry card? Okay, so if a card or a tile says to family or possibly to gentry, so for instance, if I had played this card here, it would then require a footman. To gentry refers to any 2 cards in your hand, whereas to family members, well, they must specifically be 2 family members, so I could not play this card as it does not have a family crest, where, however, I could play something along the lines of that since I have 2 family members, okay? If it said to gentry, any 2 cards from a player's hand can be played. However, you'll notice that this tile right here has a number on it. All of these have some sort of number, and as the game progresses, there may be tiles with larger numbers on them. Those refer to the reputation marker that is shown on a player's board. You cannot play a number here that is larger than a number here. This is a minimum value that it must exceed, match or exceed. The same goes for various gentry, this being the exact same as that which this must meet or exceed, okay? So that is the ability to invite guests. Any questions on inviting guests?
Nope.
All right, moving on now to step 4, which is providing service. If there are any servants that are required, and moving on, let's say instead I had played, we're going to manipulate some things just for a better example here. If I had played the footman, requires 2 gentry to be played, and that is not a voluntary thing. You must play 2 gentry, meaning 2 cards from your hand. At this point, provide service. This gentleman does not need any service, whereas Miss Anne Harlow does require the service of a lady's maid. So then she must be attended. If she is not available, due to being possibly in the servants' quarters like so, I cannot play this card. That is really, really important, okay? Oh. What?
The housekeeper can act as a backup for a lady's maid.
True. So if that were the case, here, these 2 are kind of jacks of all trades. Notice the higher standing. Physically, they're a little bit taller. They can they can do the lower jobs if need be. So in this case, the housekeeper could also supplant. So in that case, providing service is as simple as placing that down onto the card. All right. Again, if the available servant or servants are not available, that gentry card cannot be played. Moving on to step 5, enjoy the favors with an extraneous you. The benefits resulting from the activity and the attending gentry are now enjoyed. These come in the form of 3 different types. First off, we have income. So the amount shown in pounds or in quid, however you want to call it. Then there may be reputation, which are the lion symbols. And there may also be fleur-de-lis symbols, which are invitations to new guests or possibly the dismissal of other guests, like so. So, invite guests or dismiss a guest. So this shows a fleur-de-lis over top of a wastebasket. I think it's good. That suits, right? Exactly. All right, so the favors are acquired in the following order. So, first off, let's say we had something along the lines of these 2 gentry did not require any servants. There we go. So now we get to enjoy favors. The favors are acquired in this order. The total money from all sources from the bank. It is possible, you'll notice that some tiles provide some amount of money, meaning this would be 300 pounds. There is none here, whereas that will get me the option or the availability to be able to invite a prestige guest. But in order, we go total money. So here we could either get money or reputation. Let's say I choose the money, I would get a total of 200 quid. So that would then come here into my tableau. Then total reputation listed on all sources. And we move the reputation marker 1 space clockwise on the track. So I definitely would get 1, but if I chose to get the money instead, I would not get that one. So I would just get 1 reputation there. Each time the reputation marker travels from the 5 to the 1, this gets upgraded to the next level of reputation, so that now in the future, if I had acquired, say, a tile like the smoking room that requires a reputation level of 2 for it to become an active activity, now I could be able to play it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. It is possible to lose or spend reputation. If I were to ever drop back over, then I would drop down like such if I ever cross that threshold going the other direction as well. But total money, then total number of reputation going back, I had gained 1, and then befriend or dismiss gentry as indicated on all sources, and all kept cards are shown. So there are no secrets in Derbyshire society. So right here, I am not acquiring any new guests, but I do up here. So this is pretty simple. So the main gazebo with afternoon tea says that I can invite 1 prestige guest. In the expert game, you have a display of prestige guests as well as casual guests. Normally, it's draws off the top of the deck, or mystery meat, as we call it. Whereas in the first part of this game, you have a choice of casual up here or the deck, and prestige or from down here in the open display. So if I do not wish to have any of these, I then could choose this card like so. And if I do so, I must show everybody in the game, hey, I have now, I have a guest in my hand, which is Margaret Viscountess Brisbane?
Viscountess.
Viscountess Brisbane, there we go. So she would immediately go into my hand of cards, but again, I could not even play her or have her take part in an activity until my reputation meets or exceeds that number being 4, okay? Now, if I were to dismiss a guest, this would happen at the same time. So if so, then this says draw 2 casual guests, choose 1, discard the other to the bottom of the deck. Whereas if I chose to dismiss, if I dismiss a guest, sorry, you're stuck with your family, so you can't dismiss them. It may be a guest who attends the current activity. So for instance, if for whatever reason these I'd played, I could dismiss this gentleman. You can dismiss from what you've played, from your discard pile, or from your hand of cards, as long as it's not family members, okay? Notice you do this in a particular order. You get money, you get reputation, then guests are either invited or dismissed, meaning I still would get his £100 before dismissing him, take his money, and then send him along his way, all right? You place it at the bottom of the appropriate deck, be it the prestige or casual guest deck. Then the active player can purchase any one tile that they can afford from the builder's market. So you'll notice that these range from 3 to 800. Some of the tiles have an adjustment on them, plus or minus some amount of money. This is £100 cheaper, so that would be £200, whereas this one is 200 more, that would be £1,000. The rules for acquiring improvement tiles from the builder's market says that no duplicates in the same estate, so you cannot have, say, 2 barns. 1 barn is enough. The amount shown above the tile and any adjustment on the tile itself. The new tile, let's say I choose to take the barn, the new tile is placed face up on the non-rose side. So you'll notice there's no rose here. The bad example, these do not flip, whereas these here do have a rose symbol on them. Once they have a rose symbol on them, they never flip back over, okay? So, in this case, I would then place this down below, but we're just going to put it, well, actually, there we go. There. It goes like so, so your tableau will be building in columns, and so on and so forth. Any questions on those?
No.
All right. Then, the builder's market would then slide all the way to the left, and we would refill that last space. Prestige order of the tile will come into play if multiple tiles are required. We'll talk about that more later when it actually comes into play. Okay? All right, so we'll put that back out there. There's a couple things left, and then we can go ahead and get started. So let me move this back down for you guys. So there are special actions, and these special actions are anytime actions. First off, you can borrow money. Decrease your reputation 2 steps for each £100 borrowed. Never needs to be repaid, but you do lose in reputation. So if I were to borrow, say, £100 because I wanted to buy a tile there, and that would actually drop down, but you can't drop below 1. So there's that. The second one is service help. Service help says refresh as many servants as desired. So if you have some servants, say here, and you want to be able to make use of your butler immediately, you can do so, but it costs 3 reputation per servant refreshed. Being a slave driver is not good for the reputation, you know, right? Then you can also choose to refresh the builder's market. Once per round, per player, the builder's market can be wiped, meaning all of those discarded. We will then randomly draw from the deck or from the bag, place them. The ones that were wiped after the draw get replaced back into the bag. Okay? That costs you 4 reputation points. And again, you would drop down if you drop below. Okay? There you go. Any questions on the special actions? Mm-hmm. All right. So there is one in particular tile that I want to highlight here, which is the builder's room. As an activity, players may choose to play this tile, which is how you increase your staff. No gentry are played. It does require the butler. It says hire 2 servants from the supply. You simply choose 2 of the available servants and place them into the extended service. So they would go here. The reason is it takes them some time to adjust to how things work on the player's estate, and they don't immediately go into service. They don't want to accidentally be rude. They need to be acclimated to the estate. Hence, they start in expended service. All right, let's go ahead and go over some of the various types of tiles. Improvement tiles, which are just used to host activities. So, for instance, basic essentials, as well as anything that shows that it's going to be an activity that actually gets used. Then there are service tiles. These grant service-related permanent benefits and usually are not moved to the activity space, the butler's room being an exception, hence why I wanted to point that out. Then there are monument tiles. Monument tiles, when they come into play, look like such. They all have a picture on them. They provide one-step reputation bonuses and are never moved to the activity space. They just grant you some amount of victory points and maybe some other benefit on them. Then there are suite expansion tiles. Not like sweet, but the Lionheart Suite would be a good example of them. This allows a guest to stay overnight, and it's a hybrid between an improvement and a monument tile, because here it doubles all favors of one prestige guest, but once it's used, it then flips over and now it becomes a monument, which will give you one recurring reputation every round, and it's worth 6 points at the end of the game. All right? So the final step is clearing the player board. Move servants. So anybody used goes down into expended service. You return the improvement tile down to the activity, back to its space on the country estate organizer. However, if it's the first time being used, you then flip it over, and you'll notice this gets you 2 prestige the first time, and it's worth -2 points. Once it's used, however, it flips over onto its rose side. It's now worth 2 positive victory points, and now you draw 2 casual gentry, draw 2, keep 1. And when this is used in subsequent rounds, it is never flipped back off of the rose side. Okay? Place attending gentry into the player's discard, so any cards that were played then just go into a player's discard pile here. And that's clear. That's a normal round. However, in lieu of a standard turn, instead of taking these steps here, players may choose instead to pass. Doing so has its own steps. Think of it as the family's going on a vacation and the whole household gets a much needed break. So here are the steps here. So first off, you reclaim your deck. So all of your discard comes back into your hand. So you now have a refreshed hand of cards. Refresh all the servants. So as I said, the family went on vacation, so all the servants will then be available on a subsequent turn. Place them into the available servants box. Then choose between either collecting $200 from tenant rent, not passing go, but tenant rent, or refresh the builder's market. What previously cost you 4 reputation, now you can do for free in lieu of the £200. Okay? Again, you would wipe, replace, and then put those back into the bag. And finally, just like a standard turn, you then can purchase a single improvement tile from the builder's market. Any questions on how a turn works or how passing works?
No.
Okay, all right. A couple more things and we can get started. Courtship events. Well, the highest visible in the courtship events, you'll notice, is at the end of a season. So we have it on what would be round 5, round 10, round 15, and then at the end of the game. The highest visible victory points as shown on this season's theme card are compared. This season being prestige tiles. So meaning only these will be counted, only the purple tile. So I imagine these will be highly contested early on in the game. Whoever has the highest value chooses one of the 2 Fairchild guests to bring into their hand. Also, they draw the top victory point card from the deck. Normally these range, I believe, from 2 points all the way up to 8 points, but as we're playing the expert variant, everything above 5 points is removed from the game to reduce the variance that those can hold. And if you would, flip one over so you can show folks, Chris. There you go. It has either a victory point value at the end of the game or some kind of rule breaker that can be used whenever the rule breaker is described, and we can look that up in the rules as those come into play. Okay, and I will go ahead and show you guys what those look like so. So 4 victory points or draw an objective card, it looks like. Okay, so that's the courtship event. Okay, so whoever has more value in the purple tiles during this first courtship will get one of those 2 cards. They choose which to have until the next courtship and a victory point card. However, if players are tied for the courtship event, all tied players draw a victory point card, but they do not get a Fairchild card in hand. Neither one of them gets it, or if possibly more than one, or more than 2 are tied. The final courtship space works the exact same as a seasonal one, except all of the theme cards are counted for the Fairchild's favor. So there's going to be a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 event cards out there. So there will be different tiles, possibly multiples of the same. Count up the victory points of that, and the same thing applies. They also get a victory point card with whoever has the most victory points in the theme cards. And if players are tied, highest reputation wins ties. If still tied, all tied players get a victory point card, but again, nobody gets a Fairchild card in hand. I think just other than final scoring, last thing we need to go over are the special round spaces there. So we have the village fair. At the start of a round, players who flip their study tile receive 2 reputation and 300 pounds. So let me show you. If somebody had done here, when it comes back at the end of their turn, it flips to the row size and it says future village fairs produce 300 pounds and 2 reputation. So it says just like what it does. The objective card draw. At the beginning of each player's turn, we're going to draw 2 objectives and keep them both. That is part of the expert variant, okay? So I will go over the details of that. But that is a normal round, as is the village fair. The builder's holiday. At the end of their turn, players may purchase as many improvement tiles as they can afford, so they're not limited to just 1 tile. Then there's the national holiday. Players' reputation is ignored when choosing which activity to host, as well as which guests to attend the activity. So for instance, if I had this stateroom here in my tableau down here, because maybe I had gotten it because the first
Theme card.
thank you, theme card, couldn't think of the word. If the first theme card is the purple one, maybe I want this, but I cannot play it because it has 6 reputation. I only have 1. However, during the national holiday, it does not matter. I can do that, even though this is lower. That's the only round in which you can do such a thing. Then the courtship events. These are the only ones which are not rounds. These are just the courtship event as previously described. And then in-game scoring happens at the very final courtship round. Then we go into final scoring. So what does final scoring consist of? Well, let's go over that real quick. Final scoring says you're going to score victory points from improvement tiles, which is the bottom right. So this being -2, you tally up the total of your entire tableau. Then the gentry victory points, which is the upper right of all your gentry cards. So some of these may be negative, so 0, 3, etc., etc. Then objective cards, and I'm going to draw one off the deck so people can see what these look like. Estate bonus, 1 victory point per estate tile, estate tiles being the red tiles, for example. Okay? All right? Easy enough. So that is the third one, which is objective cards. Then reputation victory points based on the chart at the back of the rule book. And I will show you that real quick. We're playing the expert variant. So if you get to the final one, that would be worth 45 points. If you get to reputation 5, that's worth 15, etc. You can see the chart like so. Then there is the service victory point. Every 2 servants, or 2 points per servant, I apologize, regardless if they're in the available or in expended or anywhere else. The wealth victory point, you get 1 victory point for every 200 pounds left over. Then the courtship, so victory points on all the victory point cards. And if tied, whoever has a Fairchild in hand is the winner. If still tied, the highest reputation. If still tied, congratulations. It's like kissing your sister. Victory is shared. You never heard that before? I'm getting sideways. Exactly. It's very unfulfilling because, you know. All right, moving on. That's how you play Obsession.